Welcome to the Unit Economics Podcast. I'm Josh Stabinsky. On today's episode, I sit down with Gabe Turner, co-founder of Fjord, a floating sauna and cold plunge experience based in Sausalito, California. Fjord started with a single mobile sauna on a trailer and has since evolved into a fully built-out platform on the water, constructed using repurposed shipping containers and a salvaged wave attenuator from the bay. We get into how they went from idea to opening, including navigating an 18-month permitting process across multiple agencies, raising capital from local investors, and physically building the platform itself. We also spend time on how the business actually works, from session structure to capacity and pricing, and why demand has been effectively maxed out since launch. And lastly, we get into how Gabe thinks about expanding a physical, supply-constrained business without losing what makes the experience work in the first place. I learned a lot during my conversation with Gabe, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. Gabe, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. If you wouldn't mind just starting with a brief background on yourself, that would be great.
Absolutely, Josh, and thank you for having me. Was born in Uruguay, in Montevideo. Moved when I was quite young, so had both parents from Uruguay. Traveled a lot, and that was a kind of a important part of my background because I traveled there to visit a lot of family and just saw a lot of different cultures, and I think that was an important part of my upbringing. And so grew up in LA, Southern California, came up to the Bay Area for college, and did Berkeley for undergrad, and graduated with a business undergrad degree. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? Ended up working at a management consulting firm. And the tie-in with Uruguay is I ended up leaving the management consulting firm to go do this startup that was importing grass-fed beef from Uruguay, from my native country. So that was kind of full circle. So, and that's where I got my first kind of taste of entrepreneurship. So did that kind of like moonlighting while I was doing consulting, and ended up loving it. While at the same time, I told the owner of that business, I was like, hey, I'm applying to business schools. If I get in, I might have to go. And he was understanding. And so it was like a year of kind of building this cool startup, this grass-fed beef company. And then I was off to Harvard to get my MBA. And he was okay with it, And so I moved to Boston for 2 years and dragged my then girlfriend, now wife, Lauren, out to Boston. We had a great time. We moved back to the Bay Area afterwards. And so I've been kind of in and out of the Bay for the better part of 25 years. Came back to the kind of tech scene. I was doing, consulting in tech. I kind of came back to that, and then found my way at a prominent kind of VC firm running the head VC's like global network of VC funds. And that was fun because it combined my international kind of experience and interest, frankly, with my passion for entrepreneurship, but had this kind of great brand from this VC firm. So we were able to really like grow around the world and set up VC funds, or help set up VC funds in all these kind of developing countries and emerging markets. Did that for almost a decade, and then left right before COVID. I was kind of like done with it. Went to join another VC firm as an investment partner. And it was right when SVB and all this stuff was kind of going off a cliff. It was really hard to fundraise. And sure enough, I was joining a fund to kind of get a new fund going in the world of retail technology. I always had a passion for retail and experience-based businesses. And so we were going to raise a fund around that, and ultimately fundraising was just such a pain in the ass. And I was doing it for kind of someone else, really. It wasn't ultimately my baby. And I said, you know what? I want to go and do stuff that's really mine, that I feel a true ownership of, that I could put my stamp on proudly. And that's what led me to kind of where I am now, which is doing businesses that are not in technology. They're in-person physical businesses. The first of which was what we call neighborhood clubhouses, called Township. So I did that with my good friend Jordan Dodds here in Marin, where I am based. And we started just around COVID. He set up a clubhouse in Sausalito. We ended up opening one in Sonoma. So I was kind of doing that with him part-time, while also coming up with this idea of Fjord alongside my co-founder of Fjord, this guy, Alex Yenny. And so it's been a long meandering path, as I've just described, but one that I think combined a lot of elements, a lot of things as you pick up as you go. One of those things was just like doing things like venture that I enjoyed. I still never quite got that itch scratched of like wanting to do something with people physically around kind of hospitality. I always had passion for. And so with Fjord, I've been able to really scratch all that and just have a blast and still be entrepreneurial. So yeah, that's where we are today.
What specifically did you see in the market that led you to think, okay, there's something around the sauna space that's worth exploring?
It was from a place of like pure passion for that experience love of how I was feeling, right? So for decades before I opened Fjord, I was like a fan of the hot cold experience, right? Like my wife and I, we were like young couple just like traveling with like, on a budget on a dime. We were like trying to sneak into like the local, whatever bathhouse, wherever we were traveling. And we just loved that experience. And it was like that feeling of, coming out of a hot room and then a cold plunge and just like this feeling of bliss. And I was like, man, if I could bottle that up and get more people to experience that feeling. So that's really what like the ground truth was. That's what I wanted to share. And then it was like, okay, how do we build a business around that, if you will? But it wasn't until I met my co-founder and we were kind of the spark that each of us needed to make it a reality and make this into something real. Yeah.
Yeah, so my understanding is that your first sort of like foray into the space was a mobile sauna on wheels. Is that correct? What did that look like?
Yeah. And that, that was, it's a trailer, right? So a sauna built on wheels, and it was purchased because I had gone to an event in Vancouver called the West Coast Sauna Summit. It's the first annual one they were doing a couple years ago. And when we were starting to really like make this real. And so I kind of went up there to just learn from operators, and learn from other people in the business. And in the process of going there, it takes place on a lake. There's a bunch of mobile saunas that people brought. And I went up there with no intention of like getting a mobile sauna or like starting it that way. But I loved that experience and I just thought it was so fun. I was like, I just kind of want one personally. And so I spoke to one of the builders who I thought built like the best one up there. And anyways, he was based in Squamish, BC, north of Vancouver, and ended up working with him on a design and went to pick it up. And yeah, that was before Fjord was officially open. So we're like, okay, let's just start doing kind of marketing, if you will, like cool events and whatnot with this mobile. And so I would take it out to the beach and I would take it to little events here and there. There's a active plunge community, these ladies that plunge kind of across the bay. And so I would show up at their events in the early morning with the sauna and they were loving it. And so it was a good way to get the word out about Fjord, but mainly it was just a good way to like also just learn how do you operate a sauna business, right?
Yeah. What does the Fjord offering look like today? Because I'd love to frame this around like starting with the trailer and where we are now, and then obviously into the future.
Yeah, we're not much further from the trailer, unfortunately, in that we only have one platform floating at the end tie of a marina in Sausalito, California. It's just north across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. Hopefully, many of your listeners have been there. Kind of a touristy little town, but there's actually a thriving community that lives there. And like I said, I had that other business township just up the road from where Fjord is. So, anyways, we're in this marina. You kind of checking in our little kiosk. We walk you down to the end of the marina. And there is our platform with two saunas that we built out of containers. And it was just great. I mean, it's just in a perfect location. And this was not like planned for. We didn't like, that's our spot. It was just, I'll tell you the whole story of how we ended up there. But beautiful location, unobstructed views. You got like the mountains and you got the city of San Francisco in the distance. And you just got this beautifully unobstructed view. And we have currently, one platform with two saunas. We're working currently on expansion. So we'll have another platform with two larger saunas. But like I said, we're still in what we always call kind of like MVP mode. Like we just kind of put this in the water to see if it would float and if it would succeed. And then we would see, like we always call this the showroom. We're like, let's build this first iteration of a floating sauna. Hopefully people like it. And then hopefully we'll meet some investors and have some meetings with them in that. And they'll invest in our real business down the road. So this was always just like, not even step one. It was like step half, but it's been very well received. We opened in July to a lot of fanfare, a lot of attention. And so essentially those two saunas have been sold out, booked out every single slot since opening.
Yeah, it's an incredible space. It is beautiful. The view is beautiful. The spaces, the actual units are beautifully designed. It's unbelievable. And I feel very fortunate to have gotten to go in person. So if we take a step back, what was going on, I guess, in the days or weeks leading up to actually not launching formally like in July when you had your first guest, but like the days leading up to maybe, let's say, permitting? What came first? Was it the site location or figuring out how to actually build the units themselves? And what did it look like to actually secure the location and to be able to even start this from the beginning?
Yeah, it's a neat story because when Alex and I met, right, we were put together by a mutual friend he was like, you both have this idea. You can't stop talking about it. You guys should meet. And we kind of hit it off. We had like a 5-hour conversation where we just like immediately realized that we had very similar visions for what this experience could be. But again, by this experience, it was not like we said, oh, we need to do floating on the water in a marina. It was just like, we need to do something interesting in the hot, cold space that is sort of nature based. That's not just like an indoor bathhouse. We're here in Northern California. We want to celebrate the environment, be outdoors. And so we both had the same kind of like ethos around this and what we wanted to be, but we did not have a location in mind. Frankly, we were even like thinking more around land-based experiences, like what's something that could happen in the mountains or, in a creek or something. And it wasn't until we met the ultimate owner of this marina, who's a young, great developer by the name of Carlo Berg. We were up in Sonoma, like north of us, looking at this old port that he owned. But we weren't meeting him; we were meeting somebody who works for him, and that's the gentleman that was like, "You should actually meet my boss who owns this marina in Sausalito." We're like, "Sausalito, like marina, sure, yeah." So we went to go see the space, and yeah, immediately we were like, "Wow, this could be special." And I mentioned Carlo because he was such a force. He's really, I think, without him, I don't know if we actually could have made this happen, because he saw our vision and our passion for this. And he immediately was like, guys, I know the platform you need to use. Let me go and acquire it for you. I know, I have lawyers that have done stuff on the water their whole, careers. So let me put those lawyers to help you out. So he was instrumental, frankly. So yeah, that's kind of what was the spark, I'd say, was meeting Carlo, seeing the space. And that really got gears rolling for us, because without a firm location in mind, this was just kind of a dream for Alex and I too. Like, we were leaving our careers, but I still had one foot in venture. And it wasn't until we really fell in a spot and it was becoming real that I could be like, all right, I'm actually going to quit that day job and really start focusing on Fjord full time. And so, yeah, I think finding that location was the spark, and then everything started rolling from there.
I guess you must have been simultaneously working on the development of the units while also working on the permitting. Walk me through what that whole process looked like.
It's funny because we were entrepreneurs who were so naive, and it was for the better, I'd argue. If we were like maritime developers, we would have walked away from this project so quickly. It's almost better to not know what you don't know. And so Alex, God bless him, he was like undertook the permitting effort and read every law and act that had been sort of passed around sort of the Bay, the San Francisco Bay. And so he was able to kind of read the laws back to these permitting agencies to be like, well, we're allowed to, because, in Section C, it says this. And so he kind of like really did his homework, and we came to them super prepared and said, like, sure, like, it's zoned recreationally. It doesn't say you can't do saunas, right? So that was a process of like 18 months of going back and forth with agencies. And during those 18 months, because we had to get permission from the main, the one who has main jurisdiction, which is BCDC, Bay Commission. And then we had to get permit from 8 other agencies that they kind of fed us into, which were like federal on down to local, and then the city of Sausalito. So we had to meet a lot of people and had to submit a lot of applications. So it was not trivial. During that time, as we started to get yes, and just come back with this and this, then we were also focusing on the build. And the build meant like go out and raise money, right? Because now we got to order containers. We got to contract a sauna builder to build the saunas inside of those containers. We got to have a build crew. But, when, like I said, we were naive and we were just scrappy. And so we got, local angel investors to take a chance on us, because they're like, wow, that would be so cool to have that here locally. None of them were like, oh, I'm going to make a lot of money on this at all. They were just like, wow, that'd be fun to have. What a novel concept. And so we were managing to scrap kind of like 10, 25K checks here and there. Yeah. And then we got to the kind of build phase, and, we, through the help of our landlord, Carlo, we were able to find a build crew that had built a lot on the water. The platform that we ended up using, we got out in Richmond. It was this old wave attenuator. I can tell you more about that. We towed it over. Well, that's a whole nother story. So everything was just done scrappy, but like with a lot of intention, right? A lot of good intention. And then the design element really came from the help of our friend and architect, Nick Polanski, who did his dissertation on floating structures. It just so happens. So he had some really intuitive ideas and really good thinking, even though he had never built anything over the water, never built a sauna. He was just kind of really innovative and magical with his sort of drawings and his vision. And so it all slowly kind of snowballed into something real.
Yeah, talk to me about securing the attenuator. First, for listeners who might not know what an attenuator is, please, if you could describe what that actually is. And then, yeah, the story around it, just from research, is fascinating. It sounds like a crazy story. My understanding is it came from like an America's Cup, I don't know, 13 years ago or something. Yeah, just walk me through what that looked like.
The wave attenuator essentially is that it's meant to attenuate surf. So it's like back in 2013, I think when they hosted the America's Cup in the Bay, Larry Ellison really was kind of the main sponsor around it, had like contracted a firm, actually like a Finnish firm called Marine Tech to cast these huge sort of concrete blocks that float. And he had like, I think 13 of them under the Golden Gate Bridge to like basically stop the swell and the wake so that the boats inside the bay could have a kind of a smoother ride. Anyways, those got scattered around the bay, and we were able to locate one and now a second one that we're going to bring for the expansion. So they're sitting just kind of collecting, just kind of rotting on these marinas. So yeah, we were able to find one and like got it for kind of peanuts and just towed it over, which was a whole nother process. This is like 300,000 pounds of concrete that, you have to tow it in the right conditions. As soon as the tide started coming in, it was almost like impossible for that thing to move. I think the towing ended up taking like 12 hours from Richmond over to Sausalito. So anyway, it was a whole process, but it was the perfect sort of vessel, if you will, to build this on, because it's completely stable, and you stand on it, you almost forget that you're on the water. So it ended up being like the actual perfect tool. And as part of our application to BCDC, the permitting body, part of stipulation was like, we're going to be as environmentally friendly with this build as possible. And the more that we can repurpose and not have to like cast a new or create kind of new shade over the bay, as they call it, the better. And so the fact that we were able to repurpose something that was already creating shade on the bay and just bring it over with a new use, they appreciated that. There was all kinds of studies. Eelgrass is a big deal. So we did like do a study of like, is there eelgrass growing, below where we're placing this? And so, yeah, there was a lot of thought put in and a lot of sort of like, yeah, we were being quite diligent about what we were using, what materials we were going to use. The decking was all kind of redwood that we salvaged locally. So we tried to be really thoughtful about the materials and certainly the design as well. We didn't want it to clash with Sausalito. We wanted it to really be absorbed and look like part of Sausalito. The history of Sausalito itself is a whole nother story that we love to tell, because it's been for a long time a really kind of innovative, neat place on the water. Everything from building ships in World War II to, being a place for kind of like, beat poets and hippies to go in the 60s and 70s, to always, kind of thriving art scene, thriving boat and industrial maritime scene. And so we wanted to kind of meld sort of Fjord into that fabric of Sausalito rather than be kind of this new shiny thing that sort of clashed.
I'd love to touch on the environmental aspect, the environmentally friendly nature of the build itself. So my understanding is you used a lot of reclaimed materials in the actual construction of the saunas. Was there much trade-off or conflict in designing something sustainable in that way in the actual performance or functionality of the space, or did it really just blend seamlessly? Like, what trade-offs existed, if any?
Yeah, I mean, our decisions to go with shipping containers, repurposed shipping containers, right? We had to fabricate them to spec, but like we ended up using ones that hadn't repurposed. And yeah, it wasn't easy necessarily. Like we probably could have built saunas from scratch, from just wooden saunas that probably would have possibly performed better, certainly been more affordable, but not had the same design aesthetic, not been repurposed. And so ultimately it was worth those trade-offs to build something in those containers. And if you know kind of the area we're in this kind of industrial maritime area where like there are a lot of shipping containers. So again, we wanted to fit into kind of the patina of our little area of Sausalito called the Marin Ship. And so those were important aesthetic trade-offs for us. Like we weren't willing to kind of forego those, right? And using the wood that we wanted to use, which may have proved more challenging over saltwater, like we were still going to go with those. And building a sauna within a container has been done, but our sauna builder had never done it. So there was challenges there around insulating it, leakages, problems, issues, what have you. But today we're still, we have maintenance days where we're still painting and scrubbing away the rust and all these things. And so, that's part of it, but we're happy with the choices we make. We think the design really speaks for itself. And it's part of the experience. I mean, you know, from having come to Fjord, the design aesthetic of it is a really important part, we believe, of of that Fjord experience. And so we're not going to compromise on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Are you comfortable sharing roughly how much it costs to build one of these units?
I mean, I say collectively, like we raised a little bit over $300,000 to build this, what we called our showroom, right? The prototype, which isn't much. I mean, and we're talking like that's for the build, that's for, you know, the check-in kiosks, all the web presence, the branding, all that. So we did it on a dime. And that's just because we were scrappy and that's the money we had. And we tried to have it go as far as we could. But now that we're dealing with expansion and now that we need to get a little bit more legitimate on many ways, we know we're not ever going to have, you know, that kind of economics. Like the reality is once you expand, like there's costs end up going up, and folks now know us, so they're like, I could probably charge you a little bit more and get away with it. Whereas before we were just like an unknown startup. So, you know, those are the realities. But yeah, we did it for about 300 plus thousand.
I'm actually shocked it's that cheap. I mean, I say cheap because that's a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but that I would have expected it to cost a lot more.
And everybody does. People are shocked when we tell them that.
Yeah. So if we fast forward 18 months later, opening day, I can't imagine you were expecting the demand to be as insatiable as it's been. Walk me through how the setup works. How many sessions do you have per day? How many people can fit per session? And then how many days a week are you operating? So I'm just trying to get at like, what is the capacity per week? Yeah, just to provide some context around like, you open and immediately like this many people are constantly like flowing through your system, through your, through your saunas.
Yeah, and I'll give you a sense for our capacity, like our total utilization. We had started with an estimate of like 55%, max 60% utilized. So we were like shutting down. Our vision was to like not even open during middle of the days in the middle of the week. Like we had opened with like 8 a.m. to noon. We're going to be closed from noon to 4. Then we're going to reopen at 4 till like 8 or 8:30 p.m. And like that's how it's going to go for like 6 days a week. And quickly, every slot was taken. We opened 12 to 4. Those quickly got booked up. And our utilization has been north of 100. I say north of 100 because we do these kind of buyouts now where groups will take over the whole platform. And that's like, we had never even budgeted for that. So yeah, it's been insane. And we did not expect that. Like I tell you, our meetings before opening were like, how are we going to fill this on like a random Wednesday? Like we're going to have to go to tourism operators in San Francisco, like bike rental shops, and like give them like cash to just like send people our way. And, you know, Airbnb experience. Like we were just throwing everything into the, how are we going to fill this damn thing? And so, yeah, it's been a refresh. We don't have to bring cash to bicycle renters. Every day we do morning sessions that we call our shared sessions that are 90-minute, what we call kind of communal style. You can come as an individual, right, Josh? I think you participate in one of those. 8 people share in both saunas, and it's fun. It's like people get to know each other. I come in and clean at the end, and was like exchanging phone numbers, and it's a really like fun vibe. And we love that. That was really a core part of the ethos. We didn't never want to get away from that element because even though if it may not be as lucrative, like for us, that was a real big part of it. It was just like come before work, get a quick soak in, and then like be on your way. And then 90 minutes certainly gives you that opportunity. So like we do these morning sessions at 7:30, 9, and 10:30 a.m. And then at noon onwards, it's private sessions where you can book a sauna for a private group, up to 6 guests in a group, and you get it for 2 hours. And so, you know, again, max. So you got 24 people in the morning, you got 6 people, you have 8 sessions, right? Like you got 48 in the afternoon. Like we're not cycling through a lot of people because we're a really small space. That said, we had never anticipated that level of demand was going to be 100% plus full. And so like, I'll tell you, we told our investors we were going to give them money back in like 2.5, 3 years if we were lucky. And we've fortunately proudly paid them back in 6 months. I don't think you can ever attribute these kind of things to one element. We had a strong story and we had strong branding. We brought aboard early days, a good friend of mine, a photographer whose name's Alex Farnham, who did our photography work early. He did our videography work and now has become a full partner of the company and does way more than just the branding stuff and the creative, although that's his sphere. So anything you see from Fjord online is a result often of Farnham and of Yenny, both Alexes, collaborating to kind of tell the Fjord story. And so that was a really strong element that people, I think, quickly caught on. And the way things spread these days with social media, like we were a benefactor. So we didn't have to do advertising. We just had to like tell a good story, show the visuals, like the design was strong, the architecture was strong. We had to show people. And I think ultimately then the experience itself, like one of our investors said earlier, he's like, you know what I love about this is like it's going to market itself. Anybody who comes to the experience and takes a photo and shares it with their friends, people are going to be like, wow, I want to go do that. So, I think the experience of jumping in the bay after a sauna and like sitting there and seeing this view and taking it all in, I think people that really appealed to people. And so that was clearly like probably the strongest element that led to our success was like the good sort of like, the positive reviews we were getting and the word was spreading. And then, yeah, you couple on top of that, like all the sort of trends around sauna and cold plunge, and
Sure.
that didn't hurt certainly, but we were adamant about building a business that was going to live beyond the current hype cycle.
Yeah, let's talk about that a bit. I've heard you describe Fjord as the anti-spa. What does the ethos look like? What was most important to you in that regard?
It was aligning on those main principles of like nature based, outdoor, simple. I think simplicity, and like we're Fjord, right? The roots are Scandinavian. We sort of owed to that side of kind of sauna culture, which is just like, the Nordic cycle is very simple, right? You get really hot, you jump in a cold body of water, and that's it. There's no frills. There was no massages or other treatments. There was no breathwork classes. There was not, so we just strip a lot of that stuff. And not that I personally love that stuff. So I see the value in people offering that. But for Fjord, we really wanted to keep it a simple process and let the hot cold experience kind of be the the core of the experience and be the real highlight. And yeah, putting it in outdoors and putting in nature and letting people kind of hit all senses, in that you're not indoors in kind of a closed off box. You're like, if you see Fjord, it's like these huge windows that are overlooking the water, and you have seals swimming in front of you, and you got a little kayaker in front of you, and what have you, and like taking all of that in as part of your experience is a big part of it. And so that certainly was part of the ethos, is like celebrating the beautiful environment that we live in and trying to encapsulate that from a sauna. But we always said, like, we don't want to be limited to being a sauna business. We are about, we would say, like, it's kind of West Coast ethos of like being in nature, and providing an experience. And I think, a really true sort of organic, natural experience. If that's in hot, cold, and doing the Nordic cycle, great. If in the future Fjord goes and does other stuff that involves kind of health or wellness or whatever, but nature elements like that's kind of where we want to play. And we don't want to be limited to like, oh, we're just a sauna rental company.
Yeah. Yeah. I personally really appreciate the approach you've taken. I'm curious if you've been surprised by the primary demographic you've seen booking slots, booking private sessions at Fjord.
Yeah. I mean, the beauty is there's no primary, like it's been so many, very, a variety of demographics where I think you could have expected that given its, growth on Instagram and the success it had on Spring there, like it would have been a certain demographic that may have skewed a little younger, or, folks coming up from San Francisco and being kind of like the tech neurotic crowd. And it just wasn't. I mean, sure, that's part of it, but there's, grandmothers coming with their grandkids, a lot of older folks that like live either in Marine or around the Bay who've come. There are health conscious people and not, there's just a wide range. And that for me has been the most fun, because 90+% of people who come short have never stepped foot in the Bay. Living in the Bay most of their lives, they've never actually swam in it. And so us being the kind of gateway to that, like a portal to allow you to jump in the Bay and thereby experience it, ideally love it, and in the future, hopefully take care of it. That's, I think, the most important kind of impact we can have. And so having a wide variety of folks come experience it has been really, really great. For me, that's been the best part of this.
The demand, as we've said now several times, has been absolutely insatiable. You've had celebrities like Chloe Fineman come, and I'm sure that, doesn't help.
It helps and then it doesn't help.
Exactly, right. That drives even more demand and awareness, which is great. But when you're so supply constrained, that probably causes a massive strain on the business. And so I'm curious, at what point did you realize we are going to need to expand? And having been through the initial build out, are you able to scale significantly faster now with each subsequent build out, or do new complexities surface every single, with every single unit?
Well, we realized it like shortly after opening. I'd argue even before opening when we saw the kind of pre-sale numbers. Just like to give you an example, we were hoping we were going to hit 25K in pre-sales. That was like our goal. And our goal was to hit like a 500,000 in revenue. So we had conservative goals, but like literally that's where we thought we were going to be. And so this was like a prototype. We didn't know. And sure enough, I think we had a day where we hit 25K in the first kind of week of something of pre-sales. And we both, like Alex and I, looked at each other like, whoa, okay. And then by the second month, maybe 2.5 months, we had hit our year goal. And we're like, wow, okay. We were way off. And so I think right away we realized that there was something there, and that the problem, yeah, with scaling a physical business is not, it's not like a tech SaaS business. You can't just like put out more licenses. Like we had to quickly realize like, oh man, we're going to need to build more. And that means go through the permitting process again, fundraising process again, and this and that. And so we got on it pretty quickly. And, we told our investors like, hey, here's your money back, but now turn around and give it back to us, and double it, because we need to build more. The challenges will continue coming. I'd argue that like because we're expanding in our current location, it's going to be a little bit easier than the first time because everybody knows us. We know the process. They kind of know our footprint and what we're looking to now increase that footprint. Moving to new sites is going to come with its own challenges, and those sites may be floating sites. Those sites might be land-based stuff. Like who knows, right? We're not just going to pencil ourselves into like we have to do floating, even though that might work in certain locations, and we're looking up and down the coast at sites that might fit. And we're eager to do something bigger, frankly, here in our own backyard of like Bay Area, because as I said, this was always prototype, and so we have visions of something that can be much larger. We looked at Oslo, Norway as a great example of like where they've done floating and they've done it great. And they built this whole kind of floating sauna village. And it's become like the poster child of Oslo tourism, which is ironic because Oslo, originally the city was like pushing them out and made it illegal and made it really hard for the first floating sauna about 10 years ago to operate. Now they fully embraced it, and there's a whole community, and it's become, like I said, the kind of thing that people point to of like Oslo. And we sort of joke that like San Francisco will hopefully have that Oslo moment, and if we can help usher that in, all the better. But that's going to take us and other operators ideally to come in and like create a real, thriving kind of sauna ecosystem in the city, and it's going to come. I have no doubt it's going to come, and we hope to be a big part of that. So that's kind of what's next.
Are you thinking about expanding geographically outside of the state? Like, I can imagine this experience resonating really well in a city like Austin, for example. Is that a consideration for you, or are you just focused on California for the time being?
Say California and probably like the West, Fjord, and how we want to do things in nature. Like for us, exploring ideas of doing stuff in the West, be that land, mountain, snow, on the sea, that gets us really excited. But as far as moving beyond that, it's not, I'd say, on our radar. Like there's a lot of operators opening up cool stuff around the country. We were joking kind of before the call in New York. There's like 8 saunas opening up, or 8 experiences opening up just this year. And so we know there's other areas that are busy. And I think we have enough on our kind of plate here with California and with the West. And so, yeah, we're excited. We're excited to build this here. We think the climate is like perfect for this activity year round. I think we have the right culture for it, obviously a health and kind of wellness oriented culture. And so I'm excited about the prospects of just focusing here.
Yeah, we had talked about a conference that you had recently attended shortly before I got to visit Fjord in person. I'd love to hear about what you're seeing and what you're learning about in the market broadly.
Yeah, that event was the West Coast Sauna Summit that I had originally gone to a couple of years ago. Was the next iteration of that. It was a lot of fun and better attended and more professional. And so like you're seeing it already, the growth and that everyone's talking about, right? It's still a small sector, but growing really quickly with new entrants all the time. There's excitement, but there's also kind of trepidation and fear that like, is it going to be done right? And that's an interesting thing because right means different things to different people. But if you talk to the sauna community, if you talk to a lot of folks like that were at the summit who have, their heritage is Finnish, for instance, for them, right is something that truly honors the story and the history of sauna, like the thousands of years of the experience. And so I think their concerns are valid, which is like, is this experience, that means so much to me, my family, my community, is this just gonna kind of be ruined by, a couple like capitalist Americans, right? And so I think there's value in like paying homage to that. Whether you're doing a Scandinavian style like us, or you're doing Banya style, or home hammam, or wherever you're sort of taking it from. I think we don't have an organic experience here in the U.S., so we've sort of taken the onsen of Japan or the temescal of Mexico. Like we've taken from all the experiences and kind of like meshed them together in this fun thing, which I think is great. But I do fear that like with some of the stuff happening, it sort of, I don't know, it maybe devalues that a bit, and it's more about the show, and it's about like, and I tease this in a nice way, but like the snowballs with like the scented snowballs you throw in and like create scent, like that's all fun, and I don't blame you for doing that, but it also, I think, like for folks who've been part of a legacy and of a culture, it's sort of like gamifies it a bit, or Disneylands it a bit, right? People are going to experience this any which way. I think the most important is that people are experiencing it, and young people are going to these places and they are having a great time, and they're seeing the value of being healthy, and like the joy and the ecstatic feeling that this experience gives you. And the cool thing is like a lot of them are replacing going to a bar, right? And drinking alcohol and doing things that maybe aren't as healthy, but do get your endorphins going. And so I like that. I think it's great. The more young people that like go to other ship, for instance, after work, in Manhattan, like fantastic. Let's go. I like that you're going to see a growing industry that brings a lot of people into the tent. I hope it keeps the elders, as I call them, happy, and that it still honors the tradition of sauna. And so with Fjord, I can say that you will always have ideally authentic experience that's very simple but very joyous, that's going to be in a well-designed, well-intentioned space. And we are going to look after the little things. That's what our team is really good at. And so I hope you will always have that kind of experience when you come to Fjord.
Yeah, I really appreciate how thoughtful and how deliberate you are. I have maybe a slightly harder question, which is today, now that you're seeing all of this growth and there's obviously so many tailwinds in the market, there's clearly insane demand for what you've built. What are some of the points that investors today that maybe weren't part of the first, cohort of investors that you worked with pushing back on? Something that I can imagine somebody pushing back on, and I do not agree with this point, is that is this just a trend, right? Is this just a trend like anything else? First of all, are they, is that a concern? And also, yeah, what other pushback are you getting at this point?
Yeah, I think that concern of being a fad that's here today, gone tomorrow, I think it's a valid concern, right? I was on the investing side for a long time. It's something that I was very cognizant of and wanted to be, to mitigate. For us, mitigating is like building something that is special and that will hopefully last the test of time. Like it will hopefully, if we do Fjord right, it will ride this wave. And when the wave is done, it's still going to be a beautiful experience in a beautiful location, and that should not go away. The appeal of that should not go away. Aptly to your podcast, unit economics are important, and so you have to also nail that part. And I think if you're an investor and you're investing in an experience that maybe is spending way too much money on its space, or way too much money operating, right? So its capex is high, its opex is super high. It's offering a lot of services that are high, in labor intensive services. Then you got to sit back and be like, is this the right business for me to invest in? Right? Like, will this last? If the trend goes down and the amount of visitors goes down, can this still survive? And if you look at Fjord, I think it's built well in that way too, is that like we just don't have a lot of those frills, and we don't offer a lot of those services. And I think our businesses are run pretty lean, very lean now. If you could argue, we don't even do towels, right? We have laundry. And that's Not by design, that's by force. Like we just don't have those facilities, and that's fine. That's going to be reflected in our price point. Is going to be a little lower than going to a spa or a bathhouse. I think people are okay with that. So, yeah, I'd argue that like investors should be weary because you're going to see a lot of these, but you're seeing a lot of these. You go to a strip mall right now, and service businesses are really the only things that are making money because retail, apparel, all that is challenged, and so you're seeing services and you're seeing things like nail salons and gyms and I think sauna, cold plunge places are in that frame. And so you're seeing those pop up. And yeah, I'd question if those are going to last. Are they built with intention? Are they built as somewhere that people do want to gather? I think you can't forget the social element of what this experience is and how important, how critical that social element is. And I think sometimes when you do these rent to sauna places where you just kind of like go into your sauna and you go into your private cold plunge, it gets the job done. If the job is like, I want to feel good and I want to get that rush and the endorphin rush I was talking about, like it'll certainly do that. But I always point to like the Finnish, example of like when they talk about health and how the sauna to them is so integral and it's such a part of their culture. But it's the health element is not just from doing this act of sauna. It's the social piece of it is super healthy because the community gathers at these public saunas and they talk and they converse and they share and they take joy in being around each other. And so like that social element is so critical to the quote unquote healthy aspect of a sauna. And when you do these kind of isolated sauna experiences, like you don't get that. And so I question the sort of the viability of those for the long haul.
Yeah, the social element at Fjord was an unexpectedly pleasant surprise for me in that I walked away, like you said, like having met a few really cool people that I just never would have come across otherwise. And I think there is something really critically important in what you're describing. And I think we've drifted away from experiences like that and in valuing the importance of social connection in that way, being forced to be off my phone and present with others. I think that's a really important thing. And I think that for me, something that you mentioned when we were talking in person a few months ago was, we might be at the beginning of a large trend and it'll, these things come in waves, they're cyclical. But if you compare the numbers of sauna, ritualistic sauna adoption in the US compared to the Nordics or compared to even Canada, like we're just scratching the surface here.
Absolutely. I think the actual card numbers that we got from the last summit was like, if you look at somewhere like Scandinavia's, I think they're like, call it 80% of the population goes to sauna once a week. I think in North America, like the sort of highest penetration is like in Canada and in like French Canada, you could say like, I think they were at 20% population uses sauna once a week. And I think across the US, it was 4%. And four actually sounded high for me. So like think about the growth prospects there alone. When people are like, oh, aren't you afraid of competition? I'm not as much because there's just way more demand that this competition can even fill if we do this right. Yeah. If we do kind of make this a signature part of our culture, like there should be a place in every corner, ideally. And so no, I think we have way longer to go, and that makes me excited.
What's something you've changed your mind about since starting Fjord?
Hospitality's hard, and I knew that, but I think a lot of people fear physical, in-person hospitality businesses because, from an economic standpoint, they seem sort of like just a bad investment. And it seems like you can't make money these days running a service-based business. And this has changed my mind on that in many ways, right? In that you can make it profitable, you can run it well and lean, and you can still get ton of joy out of these type of businesses, hospitality businesses that I don't think you can get from scaling a big global tech startup. And I say that as a joke because that was what I was preaching, right? That's what I was doing for over a decade was like, hey, you're not succeeding if you're not going to be $1 billion company that's either acquired for all MI or you're listed. Like that is good. The success that is success. I've completely changed my mind on that because building these kind of small community based businesses, I'd argue has given me way more joy. Sure, I'm not going to be IPOing $1 billion company anytime soon, but like the number of people, Josh, that come to us, we're based here in the Bay Area and Silicon Valley, and like how many resumes we get from people who are like, you know, whatever, working these crazy, prominent jobs, were just like, I would give it all up just to come work with you guys and build something with my hands. It shows me that itch is not being scratched on these tech jobs. There is still something that I think people want. And ever more so now in the world of AI, where a lot of these jobs, unfortunately, are going to be under threat. I think more so we need to take these kind of experienced hospitality-based businesses seriously, figure out how to employ people and create jobs that people can live on because this ideally a robot cannot take anytime soon.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the role that businesses like Fjord, service-based, hospitality-based businesses like Fjord are going to play is just going to become more and more important over time. So yeah, another excellent answer. I really appreciate that answer. I think we have time for one more question. Where do you see Fjord, let's say 2 to 5 years from now? I mean, we've talked about some of the specifics around expansion, but I'm curious to dig a little bit deeper into some of the other types of offerings maybe that you're thinking about that are still within the ethos of what you're trying to build.
Yeah. And that would be the goal, is like, sure, we have our goals and our metrics we want to hit on expansion, and we want to be in different sites, and hopefully the coming years will allow us to do that. But again, I talked about how we not just want to confine ourselves to the box of sauna. And so I think if we're doing things right, in the next 5 years, we will have opened up other avenues for Fjord. If that's apparel, if that's experiences, if that's just kind of a brand that associates around a certain lifestyle, like, and where that takes us, I don't know. It's partnering with cool other hospitality or experience-based companies. Like, the brand, we want it to stand for something. And if in the coming 5 years, we can grow it and have people really resonate with it, then I think we're doing a good job. And that's sometimes hard to put core metrics on. When we brought Alex Farnham on board to be a partner, we had to think really hard about, like, what is success for him? Like, what does it look like to help grow our brand? And it was really challenging because we're like, we don't know. Sky's the limit. But at its core, we all know what we want the brand to stand for. And so if we can explore that and build something really meaningful in that world that lasts the test of time, that goes beyond the fad, then we've done it. And I don't care how big or small, whatever that gets. That's my metric for success.
I cannot wait to see how the next 5 or so years unfold for you. If you want to share with listeners where they can find Fjord, please feel free to do so.
Physically, you can find us at the end of a dock in a marina called Marina Plaza Harbor in Sausalito. But online, we're at This Is Fjord. Fjord Feel is our Instagram. Get in touch, send us a note. And if you think we should come take a look at your town or city that's out there, let me know. But encourage folks who are thinking of getting into this space to do so. Like I said, there's a ton more demand than supply at this point, so we could use everybody. Thank you, Josh. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for the time. This was awesome. I learned so much. I seriously can't thank you enough for the time. All right, let's debrief. What stood out to me in today's conversation is just how much of Fjord is shaped by constraints. Not just in the obvious sense of permitting or physical build-out, but in the decisions around what not to include in the experience. There are no added services, no unnecessary complexities, no attempts to turn this into a traditional spa model, just a very tight focus on the core experience itself and making that work. Something I keep coming back to is how simple the model is on the surface. It's a small number of guests, a fixed number of sessions, limited capacity, and how quickly that flipped from a potential concern into one of the defining features of the business. Instead of trying to solve for more throughput, Gabe and his team are now dealing with the exact opposite problem. And so much of that comes back to the early decisions they made. Design choices, their location, and staying rooted in that core experience instead of trying to layer in complexity over time. To me, this is a story of taste, conviction in one's vision, and execution. And it's why I think Fjord, both as a brand and as a business, have real staying power. I really enjoyed my conversation with Gabe, and I hope you did too. If you haven't already, make sure to follow and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.